Hi, everyone. We're going to get started. Thank you again for joining us at the 2022 Sloan Sports Analytics Conference. These are the Competitive Advantage Talks presented by Kager, also known as Craft Analytics Group. My name is Jen Whaley, and I'm a first-year MBA student at MIT Sloan. It's my pleasure to introduce the presentation, Quantifying the Mind, Revolutionizing Golf Data for All. Please join me in welcoming our speaker, Scott Fawcett, founder of Decade Course Management System, to the stage.
Thank you. Thank everyone for showing up. I was a little nervous that nobody would be here for the last presentation, but I'm excited to see some faces. Obviously, I need to start by saying thank you to MIT and Jen Whaley and Corey Vandeveer for getting me here. I really do appreciate it. This whole decade golf thing, it was really kind of an accident, so it's really funny to me to be sitting here at MIT presenting. But I'm trying not to suffer from too much of intellectual imposter syndrome right now, but I can assure you I've got a mild case of it working. Y'all are really, really impressive people. So what I did back in 2014 is I started looking at all the shot length data, strokes gain data that Mark Brody had created. And he wrote the book Every Shot Counts, and it was purely based off of the 15 years or so at that point of strokes gain data that they had collected on the PGA Tour using the GPS tracking system that they had. And I'd already started thinking about golf as a bit of a poker game, trying to turn it into a math-based decision already because I played professional golf out of Texas A&M for 6 years, excuse me, and then started an electricity company in 2002 and started playing a lot of poker just at the country club. And then I started analyzing just golf in more of a decision-making process because I was kind of a basket case. Definitely was a lot of talent that I never got nearly out of it, what I should have when I was playing professional golf. But then once in 2011, once they released the next version of the strokes gain statistics, it's where they first released strokes gain putting, which is just basically, you know how many strokes it takes to hole out from any given area on a golf course, any lie, any distance, all the way through the putting green. And that's essentially what Mark Brody's book did for us. So now we've got the data of what it takes to hole out from any given area on the golf course. And then what I did was take shot patterns, basically my own shot pattern as a professional golfer, the standard deviations of directional and distance control. So if I know how big a shot pattern is, and I know how many strokes it takes to hole out from any given area, effectively, even though we're here at MIT, all I did was a whole bunch of basic expectation math to start selecting best targets. Because historically, golf has just been like all folklore, a really bad observation of what is and isn't working. In this situation right here, Aaron Wise was trying to hit a 7-iron for me at the red dot, and Aaron is a PGA Tour Rookie of the Year. He's won on the PGA Tour. He's an NCAA champion. This guy's really, really good at golf. But in these 20 shots, technically, the only place he didn't hit it was where he was trying to hit it. And so I think of shot patterns as being the deck of cards or dice in golf, the now math game. Obviously, dice and cards are what introduce a little bit of luck and a little bit of variance into any card game, poker, if you will. But technically, that shotgun blast of a shot pattern, Aaron was trying to hit it at that red dot, and he didn't know which shot was actually coming next. And that's really the key to proper course management. Too many people they're trying to make birdies constantly because they're trying to force these shots in close, but you really don't have a clue what's coming next. Then when you start taking satellite images and then the shot length data provided by the PGA Tour, most people don't believe that that's actually Aaron Wise's shot pattern. It's 28 yards wide. Well, now you're looking at a similar length par 3 on the PGA Tour. And once they get out on the course, it actually becomes exponentially larger, and that's largely because they're trying to hit all these funky shots. They're trying to score on holes. This particular one has a scoring average of 3.22. Now, most people on an average tour event, it takes about 16 under-ish to win the golf tournament. But technically, what really needs to happen is you need to separate yourself from the field by 12 to 15 shots. So I don't care if you're Zach Johnson when he won the Masters at 1 over par, he was about 14 shots clear of the field, or even when Cameron Smith just won the Tournament of Champions at 34 under, he was also 14 shots clear of the field. So if you think about this hole right here, again, I'm saying this half tongue-in-cheek, it's a joke, but it's just not that hard for a tour player to flare a 6-iron somewhere on this green and 2-putt it for par. If they did that, they would gain 0.22 shots. If they did that 72 times, a 4-round event, they would gain 15.8 shots. Literally hitting this green and 2-putting, and this is not the most perfect math possible, but the general idea holds. if they were to do that quality of golf, they would literally win basically every single golf tournament on the PGA Tour. And this is where I try to get my players to stop trying to make birdies and shift their way back into just picking good targets and trusting the variance within their shot pattern is what will create some of these great opportunities. So that's just kind of the background on what Decade is and what I did to create a course management system, if you will. But what we're really here to talk about is the mindset stuff that we've been able to quantify now out of our Decade app. And I really do think this is pretty cool stuff. So if you shoot 78, 73 in a golf tournament, in our Decade app, all of your data from the 78 is going to go into this bucket because I'm creating a generic profile of someone who averages roughly 79. The data from your 73 is going to go into this bucket, but you obviously average 75.5, so this is your peer group, assuming obviously you maintain yourself in that bucket. So I know generically, on a par 3, with a person who averages 76, they're going to average about 3.31 shots to hole out. Excuse me. Excuse me. So interpreting data, I mean, y'all are all really good at math, I'm going to assume, but it's really interpreting data and figuring out what to do about it that is the real skill. And a lot of different stats programs, they just kind of give you all these numbers, but then you don't even know what to do with it. What we do is we give you your generic profile. So this is Maverick McNeely. It's a player that I've worked with since he was at Stanford. He was the world #1 amateur back in Stanford. He's now on the PGA Tour. And he had a 69 scoring average while he was out on the Korn Ferry Tour. So his peer group is that 69 to 71 bucket. So you can see he's performing roughly in line with where he should on the par 4s. He was doing very well on the par 3s, so he gets a green check over there. And he was kind of struggling that year on the par 5, so it kind of gives you a little indication of where your strengths and weaknesses are. And we've got hundreds of stats in the Decade app that it has this exact same orientation. So you're just looking for these clusters of red X's or any red X that's 2 columns to the right of your peer group. It's just kind of a little light that, hey, here's where your problems are. Now, what we're really here to talk about is the mindset in the zone. Tiger, back last year, the day before he had his car wreck, was out there actually in California. He was working with a bunch of celebrities doing playing lessons. And the day before his car wreck, he was actually with Jada Pinkett Smith. We'll see if this thing plays.
A focus that you have, though, to me is very unique. You have different gears.
Correct.
All right? So just tell me, how did you train your mind?
That'd be more like my mom being Buddhist, and just naturally kind of go there.
Yeah.
And all the meditation that I've done over the years with my mom.
That's what I thought.
Yeah.
Because that's what it looks like. You look like you're in a deep meditation.
We are. Yeah.
That's dope.
My mom. In Spearfish, that's what I love to do.
Really?
Yeah, I love it. Love being in the water.
Free dive?
Yeah, love it. Absolutely love it.
So how far do you usually free dive? What are the depths?
80 feet.
You're a real free diver. I mean, that's real deal. I don't think people know, like,
It's hard.
it's very hard.
Yeah, and the patience it takes, yeah. Calming the mind, the heart rate, and being in that meditative state.
Right. At what age did your mom start getting you to meditate?
When I was born?
Okay.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
When I heard him say that, it was exactly what I needed to finally hear him say in public. I've known that for a long time, but I don't want to get my buddies in trouble who've signed non-disclosures with him. So this guy finally said out loud he's been meditating basically since he was born. And to just understand, like, you can catch up a little bit, but starting this as young as possible, obviously a lot of young students out here, just understanding that that's what's going on with the zone. The zone typically seems like this elusive, mystical state, but it's really just a moving meditation. Back in the late 90s, early 2000s, we literally thought that Tiger was playing golf hypnotized. That's actually what we thought because it just seemed so insane how focused the guy was constantly. He's literally just out there in a moving meditation, essentially. So now going back to how we understand to track our stats in the Decade portal, we've got these two things. Dr. Michael Larden is a sports psychologist that I've worked with for about 15 years now. He's worked with David Duval, Phil Mickelson, a number of different players on the PGA Tour. Great guy, great sports psychiatrist. And he's got this thing that he calls the Mental Scorecard. And it's essentially just, did you know exactly what you were trying to do with the shot? For lack of a better way of saying, did you have a perfect Decade target? You knew your trajectory, your shape, your distance you're trying to hit it, and your directional target. And then when you're actually over the shot, were you just 100% present and committed? And presence is a word that I come back to quite often because you can't be wrapped up in what's going on in the future, what you've already done. You've got to be present in that exact moment. So when you hit the shot, were you totally focused? Now, if you look at the scoring average going from 79 down to 73, your average score is roughly dropping in our portal 5.83 shots. And you can see that your mental scorecard is improving by roughly 4.37%. And that's kind of obvious that as you get a little bit better, your golf IQ is going to be better. You're just going to think a little bit better. But if you start thinking about it, the average score between these two groups is 75.9. So if they're paying attention on 4.37% more shots, and they're hitting 76 shots around, that's 3.31 more shots they're focused on per day, which is a lot. Now, this second scorecard cost, what that is we take every hole that comes in relative to par in the app with a negative mental scorecard event, and we compare it to every hole with a perfect mental scorecard, so we get a relative to par delta. So you can see it's 0.65, 0.81. I'll be honest, it's pretty hard to remove the bias of the outcome of the shot. You know, if you miss a 4-footer, you're like, I wasn't paying attention. So I don't think it's actually 0.65 or 0.8, but let's just give them, because it definitely doesn't cost you 0, and it definitely doesn't cost you 3 shots. I think 0.5 is a pretty good estimate. But if we're paying attention on 3.3 shots more per round and it's saving us a half a shot, out of your 5.83 shots you improved, literally about 1.6 of it is from an improved mental process, roughly 30%. I think that number, honestly, I've put a lot of thought into this. I think that number is pretty accurate. And one of the main reasons I do is Tiger is the GOAT. Sorry, Jack Camp. Tiger's the greatest. Tiger's for sure operating in that 98% range. When I first start working with players, we're trying to get them to 95%. That's the goal. I don't think anyone's going to be perfect unless you've been meditating since you were born. But Maverick McNeely, again, when he was the world #1 amateur, when he first started tracking this at Stanford, he's a pretty smart kid also. He's a genius. 98, 99%, he was first at 91%. So Tiger, again, we're just kind of guesstimating here. Tiger was roughly, I'm going to bet, about 8% better. And that 91% number, that's really where most people start at, is 88 to 91%. So Tiger's paying attention on 8% more shots with roughly a scoring average of 70, just to keep the math simple. Well, that's 5.6 shots more per round. Now, when I track mental scorecard, when I've got a number of my PGA Tour players that track the mental scorecard, when Maverick tracked it for himself, the actual delta was about 1/4 to 1/3 of a shot that each negative mental scorecard event cost you. So if Tiger's paying attention on 5.6 shots more per round, and it's gaining him about 0.3 shots per positive, per shot, that's 1.68 shots that I do believe, I think that number's pretty accurate, that Tiger's brain was able to get him over a guy like Maverick McNeely. And my mathematical proof of this, for sure that it's a fact, is that's actually the diameter of a golf ball, so it's got to be right. Now, one thing that I'll say is Mastery 10,000 Hours in a nod to Malcolm tomorrow. This was from a book, and it's just amazing to read Tiger saying, he was asked about when he's really in the heat of the battle, and how does he stay focused and slow everything down? And Tiger's answer was like, I don't actually. All I do is stay in my same routine. Even though I have certain putts that are bigger than others, you never see me out of rhythm. I always stay the same pace, do everything the same. So what I did on the first hole is the exact same thing on the last hole. That's the key. You can't make any one shot bigger, but most importantly, this isn't going to happen via magic overnight. You have to practice with a lot more focus and intensity so that way you can take it out onto the course, and then when the spotlight's on, you're ready to roll. I've got a number of people that I've talked to about how slow Tiger practices, and they're like, dude, it's unbelievable. He just is so focused, even just in practice. Sure, you see him out there on tour events warming up, and it looks quick, but the guy is absolutely going through his routine and knows exactly what he's doing on every given shot. Now, we're going to take a look at my first student as a case study. And as Steve Jobs says, you can only connect the dots looking backwards. If you'd asked me back in 2014, why are some of these players doing great things that I worked with initially, I would have told you because I'm a mathematical wizard, it's all the math. Looking back at it now, there's a whole lot of things that were really convenient in 2014. Again, I was a lunatic when I was playing professional golf. Luckily for me, Tim Ferriss launched his podcast in April of 2014. His second guest was a guy named Josh Waitzkin. He's who the movie Searching for Bobby Fischer was based on. He was his second guest. He's the one that wrote The Art of Learning. It's by far the best sports psychology book I've ever read personally. The Obstacle is the Way, Ryan Holiday's book on Stoicism, was released in May of 2014. I'm a huge Sam Harris fan. That's where I was really starting to dig into meditation and mindfulness. Obviously, Dr. Larden. And then I'm a big Tony Robbins fan. Started really paying attention to that guy in 2011. So I was really starting to understand the ideas of peak states, prioritizing your physiology, positive body language, all that nonsense, but it really does work. So let's actually look at a timeline of my first student. Back in May of 2014, I was going to play in the Texas Amateur myself, and I was out playing golf with a junior golfer at my home course named Will, and I bought this audiobook, The Art of Learning, and you can see the text. I was like, dude, you've got to get this thing. It's exactly what you need. We're out there playing golf one day, and I'm telling them all about it. Unfortunately for me, I got a cortisone shot in my right arm that Friday, and the doctor paralyzed my right arm for 2 days. Obviously, it came back, but he also told me, yeah, you probably shouldn't play golf for a couple months. I'm like, dude, I literally wrote 500 million cells of Excel code trying to solve course management. Now I can't play golf all summer. I appreciate that. But I sent Will a text that basically said, hey, I got a proposition for you. He replies, and I said, what I want you to do is I want you to listen to this song, and it's the song Time from the movie Inception. Jason DeSilva was Tim Ferriss's 5th guest. Again, total luck. Tim Ferriss asked him a question, is there anything you're into right now? And Jason's answer was really bizarre in my opinion. He said, I can't stop listening to this song, Time from the movie Inception. So I went and listened to it, and it's just this long, slow Hans Zimmer beat. And I'm like, dude, that's what I need. Because I'm trying to think of, like, now that I'm going to caddy for Will, and he was ranked 3,300 in the world, but the kid's a world beater. And I was like, why is he not doing better? And I was like, he's just got to get out in golf tournaments and freak out. How am I going to keep him calm? So I chose this song solely so that way I could point at my watch. If I saw him freaking out, that meant, dude, just go take some breaths over there. I'm going to play you like a video game. I'll tell you what to do next. Just go chill out for me. So I told him, I want you to listen to that song to start and end each day. We then went out to practice the Tuesday before the Texas Amateur started. And he's out there grinding. I wanted to, watch him grind too. And I was like, he said, it's time for me to go home. And he's like, what should I do? I was like, you should probably go chip and putt for an hour. And then the second I got in my car, I'm like, I thought about it, dude. You got this. Just go home. You got to get your rest. That's really what these guys, when they're peaking for tournaments, it's about getting their rest and their energy so that way they can stay mentally focused out there during a long golf tournament. The next day, well, spoiler alert, he did win, but the reason I sent him this text after he won was because in the practice round on Wednesday before the first round, on the 16th fairway, he looked at me and he's like, I got a really good feeling about this week. And I literally set the bag down. There were people on the tee, and I grabbed him by the shoulders like, dude, I promise you, you're going to win this tournament as long as you don't think about winning it until we finish on the 72nd hole. Like, you can't let the outcome become bigger than anything. You've got to stay focused, present. You can't dwell on what's happening in the future, what's already happened in the past. That really is, I don't know where it came from for me to tell him that, but literally the entire golf tournament, we had many times we were like, did you win yet? Did you win yet? No. And then finally, obviously, he won the tournament. I made him read this passage. It's the entire page 172 out of the book, The Art of Learning, every single day on the 1st and 10th tee. And it's just all about presence and mindset. This particular paragraph starts with, in every discipline, the ability to be clear-headed, present, and cool under fire is much of what separates the best from the mediocre. Presence must be like breathing. And that's literally it. Tiger, basically, the zone was like breathing to him because he had such a strong meditative practice. Well, Will went out and shot 68 in the first round, had the lead. He came out on Friday, and he was so nervous, it was unbelievable. It was a train wreck on the driving range. It was a train wreck on the first few holes. And he has a tendency to want to pout, so all of his energy was just constantly going down and kind of being negative. And all I was trying to do, I wasn't making him actually jump up and down like Tony, but I sure wanted to. And just keeping him just on him, just, dude, I need you positive, I need you positive, I need you positive. Well, he grinded out a 71, which honestly was a hell of a round for the kid at the time. He's only 17 years old, he was freaking out, and we got 71 in. The round didn't kill us. Then we went out and we ran him over that weekend, obviously, and the spoiler alert is his name is Will Alatorros. Many of you, if you know golf, have probably heard of him at this point. He finished second in the Masters last year. He just lost a playoff in San Diego a couple years ago. He's made about $8 million in the last 2 years. Yay, Will. And I don't know why I wore those shorts, but I must have been out of shorts at that time. So, understanding like the process, that's really the point of all of this, is the process. It wasn't about any math or strategy. Well, it was, picking better targets is hugely important, but it really was all psychology, and you can just see the timeline. It's just really unbelievable, and the point of all this is not just to get you to understand that meditation and mindfulness is important, but it really is, it's the key to everything. We went out down in Houston the next month. He won the U.S. Junior with me, caddying for him. It was absolutely incredible. And the point of all of this, well, actually, sorry, I forgot about this one slide. This is Bryson DeChambeau. He's actually the second player that I worked with because he went to SMU, and people have asked me before, did you sign the wrong side of your flag there? And it's actually kind of funny. He actually signed that left-handed and backwards, and when you hold a mirror up next to it, it's actually his signature the right way. I have no idea what the point of that is, but it's pretty damn cool. Now, we're going to take a hard left turn here as I just finish this off for a minute, because the real point of all this to me, and why I take all this so personal, especially with the younger people out here, you really are our future. And understanding that mindfulness is the future, unless we can start dosing the entire society with psilocybin in the water, we've got to get everybody back on track a little bit better with thinking with a little bit of compassion. And the reason I take this so serious is because these are my nephews. The one on the right in the black shirt, unfortunately, was undercut in a basketball game about 8 years ago. We went up, he got a massive concussion. Dude went totally off the rails, and as you can see in this picture right here, unfortunately, I actually believe that the concussions, because he had a second one about 3 months later in the same spot, unfortunately, I think that the concussions were a smokescreen for schizophrenia, because on April 8th of 2016, he killed his brother, himself, sister, and my sister, his mom. And I bring this up only because mental illness is so important, and understanding a little bit of compassion for everyone around us, because, and this is hard to admit in public, but I'm the one that had to go in there and clean their house up whenever it all happened. And I found his journals, and ultimately at the end of the day, he really wanted to be a school shooter because everybody at school totally abandoned him, and it was a train wreck, obviously, as you can imagine, over 16 months as he went from star athlete to a committer of a double murder-suicide. What he needed, what my sister needed, was a little bit more compassion in order to just get the help that they needed. And you are our future business leaders, and I think that understanding that mindfulness and meditation is where you're going to, no offense, but I'm sure quite a few of you in here, a little bit type A, a little bit of anxiety, and a little bit of stress. Unfortunately, obviously, we just learned today that the Stanford soccer goalies, that it was a suicide also. You've got to get out of just worrying about everything, and you've got to get a little bit of mindfulness and meditation in your life. And yeah, I think that's about it. I always got to figure out a better way to end these things, but I really do think that I really hope that y'all take this serious, because it really is what allowed me personally to get through, obviously, a very hard time in my life as well. If I didn't have that anchor of being able to be mindful, I would be a total train wreck right now. So it saved my life, and I hope eventually it saves some of y'all's.
We have time for a few questions.
Yeah. I have a question about the recording of the mental score. Mm-hmm. How do you contextualize intent on given shots if you're taking tournament rounds as your data points? For example, is that if I have a 6-stroke lead going into round 4, my overall risk tolerance on any individual shot is going to change.
It actually shouldn't, though.
It shouldn't, yeah.
Game theory is really hard to apply in golf. In poker, you can start to apply a little bit of game theory, but in golf, because it's the only sport where there's no shared ball, there's no defense, you don't have a mutual clock. I mean, you might have teed off 2 hours before the leaders posted 64. Game theory, I understand it, obviously, but it's just really hard. So I do basically tell my players to just go play golf, pick optimal targets, don't worry about all that. Again, that's a utopian view.
Oh, yeah.
But I really do believe that. So
I play some amateur tours in North Carolina, and in theory, yes, like every individual shot, you should play as you're trying to win and you're tied at any given point in time. But in the situation in which you have that contraction, where let's say you would maybe be 6. What was it the other week where Daniel Berger was a 6-stroke leader going into round 4 on his home course? What he did exactly what you were describing is that he was played differently. They probably played much more conservatively, and it backfired on him in that.
Again, that's where I do think that trying to apply game theory, it's just really, again, this is where Mark Brody and other really smart math guys, we could have really solid debates about applying game theory in certain situations, even away from the tournament, and it still would be hard to come up with the optimal answer, and there's just no way you're going to do it in real time. So I literally just tell my people, don't even try, Because the real problem with golf is 3 feet is basically 1 stroke to hole out. 8 feet is 1.5 strokes to hole out. So you lose your first half stroke of value in the first 5 feet. It takes from 8 feet to 32 feet to lose the next half stroke. So even if you're watching your opponent and they hit it up there close, you think, unless it's really inside of about 8 feet, you don't know what they're going to make. And it's really hard to tell at range how close somebody hit it. And so it's just trying to take your opponent, again, because there's no defense in golf. And again, it's a utopian view. Trust me, it's hard as shit to do.
Yeah,
but that is the way to do it. It's just hard to do.
Yeah, makes sense.
I think he had one too right here.
Firstly, I kind of got a sense that it was Will Zalatore, so it's fantastic work that you've done with him. Secondly, in light of him not sort of breaking through on the PGA Tour, but being so super rock solid, have you had to kind of continue to kind of redo that method of sending him the podcast again to potentially lead to a breakthrough? Because obviously at Torrey, both prior to the playoff and in the playoff, both putts to a certain extent were tentative. So,
So the putt on the 72nd hole, it was 8 feet 4 inches, and on uphill, bumpy Torrey Pines greens in the last group, that's probably a 40% make rate putt. Now, even if you want to factor in, it's a pretty nervy putt also to get your first tour win for $1.8 million. He didn't hit the best putt, but if he hit that putt 1,000,000 times, it would have gone in, I do believe, 40% of the time. And this is what's really hard about golf. 8 foot on the PGA Tour is where it's 50-50. It's a coin flip. At best, it was a coin flip. And what's so hard in golf is, if you and I were flipping coins and you guessed heads and it came up tails, you wouldn't be like, oh, I'm an idiot, I suck. You'd be like, okay, let's flip it again. That's literally what you have to do in golf. You have to have no memory of what just happened. And again, totally utopian. But the one thing, honestly, if there's anything that I want to talk to Will about eventually is in the playoff, on the 18th hole, he'd been losing his driver right the whole back 9. And he just stepped up to hit his normal drive on the 72nd hole. And then in the playoff, he opened way up. And right when I saw that, I was like, oh, shit. Because this guy's about to just try to slap a cut out there as hard as he can because he's freaking out. And that's really my main observation of anything that I really want to talk to him about eventually is, there's a Daniel Tosh joke where he says, if somebody's ever running at you and they've got a crowd running behind you and they're yelling, do you know how to fly a plane? You better muster up some courage and say yes. And just go get in the plane like, oh, this one's different than mine. That's the way I view that shot in the playoff, unfortunately. Like, I get it, Will. You're not driving it very well. You don't have confidence, but you need to just, this is a situation. You need to just muster up some courage and send it and see what happens. I mean, it's just a very difficult, unfortunately, thing to pull off winning on the PGA Tour.
Thank you very much for the talk, and obviously I'm very, very sorry to hear about your
I appreciate that.
loss. I was wondering, do you think mental focus will ever be something, can you observe it when you're watching the players, and will it ever be a data point that's recorded and analyzed by people like the ones in this room?
There's obviously, and I'm not a neurologist or anything like that. There's obviously some magnetized caps now that are theoretically measuring brain waves. I know nothing about it, but I do know that Sam Harris, who's a guy that's a Stanford neuroscientist, I really like him and respect him. He's like, unless you've got about a $5 million magnet with 64 leads on it, you're kind of kidding yourself. I don't know the science of any of that yet, and I'm not poo-pooing. I don't know anything about it. But just based on Sam saying, like, unless you've got a really expensive machine, you're not going to just put that in your cap and measure it. Now, I've seen where it's measuring some peaks and valleys. And honestly, as far as I'm concerned, if it just gets people to practice meditating, my main thing with meditation when I sucked at it when I was younger was I thought you were supposed to have no thoughts. And I didn't realize you're just supposed to be recognizing the ruminating thought pattern before it spirals out of control. That's the point. And then, so when you're playing golf and you're like, you can't stop thinking about what you just did wrong, well, then if you can't stop, then that's when you actively go into a following your breath meditation, listening for sounds, just anything to try to distract and slow your mind down from racing. Because, I mean, essentially, trying to win golf tournaments, in my opinion, is like trying to crash land a plane. Your brain is freaking out. It's going 100 miles an hour. And I've got a PGA Tour winner, an announcer that's been like, well, I played better golf when I was more emotional. I'm like, no, you played worse golf when you weren't invested. We're trying to get you to just be constantly more in tuned, because emotion doesn't help any decision in your life whatsoever. Again, I do say quite often that basically every decision you make in your life is math-based in some form or fashion. Even crossing the street. Is that car, do I got a 95% chance? Like, how late am I to get to this meeting? Because unless it's pretty high, it really is all based in math. And that's really kind of what Decade's trying to do, is just quantify that and then let you make better decisions. I think I lost my point from your question. Did I answer it enough? I kind of started straying there at the end, which is standard for me. I know we're running right up here on time, but...
Yeah, we'll do one last quick question.
Yeah, thanks for the talk and for sharing something so personal. I was curious, like, when you mentioned the walking meditation, do you think that that applies more for a sport like golf, which is much slower than, let's say, basketball for sure?
That's a great question. And this is where, again, Tiger's saying that. I do agree, like, golf is a different sport. But George Mumford's got a book where he's worked with Kobe, LeBron, Michael Jordan, Pete Carroll, Phil Jackson, Pat Riley. Like, this is, again, social media is a toxic train wreck, but because of all of our connectedness now, you're starting to see this is what the peak athletes have always done. So I don't know enough about football to be like, you've got to get some energy up and blow people back, but also you've got to have a still mind, so that way, and again, they're not mutually exclusive, I don't think. There's no reason you can't be like ready to roll while also having a slow, concentrated thought process. So I do agree that it seems reasonable to think that it's easier to, golf's a train wreck, so it's not easier doing golf, but it seems reasonable because of the less activity. But also, this is what the best athletes, I mean, literally in almost every genre that I've been able to research, this is what they're doing. Even, again, a guy like Josh Waitzkin, a chess grandmaster, this is how you slow your mind down from making emotional decisions. That's the key when you see these guys make terrible penalties in whatever game, and it's just like they snap for 5 seconds and they just blow it. That's, to me, what the point of meditation is recognizing that theoretically before it happens. And again, a lot of it is just like, boy, I really sucked at this. And now, Tim Ferriss got one. He's like, I used to just get mad at myself for not being able to meditate and slam a pot of coffee and run out the front door. That's not, you just have to keep trying, and you fall off the horse and you keep trying and you will get better at it. And again, it's like I joke around about saying psilocybin, but that's one of the things I do think the research will ultimately show is that learning how to use certain drugs like that will teach you how to get to that state where you're trying to. So it's like a cheat code to see where you're going, and then you have a better chance of getting there on your own just organically.
Great. Thank you so much, Scott.
Thank you. I appreciate it, everyone.